I'm Maria Elena Giassi, and this is Currents. A message of peace from Bethlehem to New York. It's a ceremony that is an annual tradition.
The peace light is a flame that has been lit in the grotto in Bethlehem, from the church in Bethlehem, and transported across Europe. And the Brooklyn Diocese Catholic Committee accept the peace light for the United States.
Plus, preparing for Christmas. The folks at Busted Halo join us to talk about Advent. And it's music to their ears, celebrating Saint Cecilia.
Saint Cecilia lived in the 3rd century in Rome, and she was a martyr. She died at a very, very young age.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. It was a welcome ceremony yesterday at JFK Airport for a torch that is burning bright. No, it was not the Olympic torch that so many New Yorkers have been hoping for. In a ceremony that is held every year, the Catholic Committee on Scouting and the Boy Scouts of America welcomed what is known as the Peace Light to Our Lady of the Skies Chapel at JFK. The light comes from the grotto in Bethlehem where Jesus was born and is brought to North America and countries across Europe as a message of peace. We were at JFK for yesterday's ceremony.
Welcoming Peace Light here at Our Lady of the Skies Chapel is very important, not only for people who work here at JFK, but also for many people who are passing. Because passing seems to be the key word of everything that happens in people's lives, and we pass the light, which symbolizes peace.
The peace light is a flame that has been lit in the grotto in Bethlehem, from the church in Bethlehem, and transported across Europe. It reaches the Austrian Airlines, and the Austrian Airlines flies the peace light over to the United States, and the Brooklyn Diocese Catholic Committee accept the peace light for the United States.
They are taking the actual living flame on the plane that flies from Vienna every time here to JFK, and they carry it through all the securities, and they bring it up here to our chapel. So it's been carried all the way from Israel to Vienna, and then from Vienna to New York and beyond.
I'm responsible for security of Austrian Airlines. An open flame on a passenger flight, that's of course challenging. As we bring it from Austria to New York, to America, we have to get the approval from the Austrian authority and the approval from the FAA. We have to have some fire extinguishers with us just for safety reasons. So it's always a nice thing, but also challenging to bring the flame here.
The Austrian scouting program, after 9/11, they sent it over here. That was the first year that it arrived here in the United States. It's kind of taken on a life of its own, and every year it grows, and there's more and more people coming from further to get the light. So it's a great thing.
In the beginning, there'd be one person, 2 people sitting here. Now it's grown where we see anywhere between 75 to 100 people show up, and at least 50 to 60 lights are going out of here.
I'm here in New York picking up the Peace Light, and I will be driving it back first to my home in Minnesota, and then on to Texas, through Arizona to California, and then back through Nebraska back to Minnesota again. The whole goal is to get this to spread as far as it possibly can.
The people who coordinate this in Europe, they had asked if we could get it to ground zero, because they brought it to ground zero the first year it came over. And so Senator Marty Golden was able to make arrangements for us to get the light there.
I think that the symbolic of the peace being brought to where signs of war are still very visible is so important, not only to New Yorkers, but to all Americans.
If you share your cookies, you have less cookies when you're done sharing. But peace and a flame work differently. When you share them, it ends up growing.
Everybody who gathered here tonight and everybody who will be receiving or passing this peace light has to be a man or woman who believes in peace, not only in terms of peace that is being brought by Christ, but also very human kind of peace that each and every one of us is responsible for.
And this light will help spread that peace to make peace work in the world.
You know, that flame keeps traveling from one place to another, and from one church and one council in one city. And 10 years ago, nobody knew what it was. So I guess we must be doing something good, you know.
As was mentioned in the report, this year was the 10th time the Peace Light has come to New York. And you may be wondering how the open flame travels by plane. Austrian Airlines transports the peace light in 2 blast-proof miner's lamps. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. The Park 51 Islamic Center can stay put in Lower Manhattan. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Maria Elena Giassi. Coming up later, a lively celebration at a Brooklyn basilica for the patron saint of musicians. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. The Park 51 Islamic Center in Lower Manhattan can stay put for now. In a story first reported by the New York Law Journal, a Manhattan judge has ruled that Con Edison cannot evict the center, but can raise the rent at the location to almost $26,000 a month. The rent hike is an increase of close to $14,000 per month. The two sides are still fighting over what Con Ed says is the close to $2 million it says it's owed in back rent. Last year, protesters took to the streets to protest the center's close proximity to the site of the September 11th attacks. Meanwhile, a government agency in Washington says Catholic University's policy of single-sex dorms does not discriminate against students. DC's Office of Human Rights says the policy is not discriminatory because the dorms do not treat men and women differently. A professor at a neighboring university, George Washington University, had filed the complaint over the summer. Last month, in a separate filing, he claimed the school is violating the rights of Muslim students by not providing them rooms to pray. And the president of Notre Dame has been elected to the board of directors of the Commission on Presidential Debates. Father John Jenkins was elected last month to the board of the commission, which sponsors and organizes presidential and vice presidential debates. Father Jenkins drew fierce criticism back in 2009 when the Catholic University honored pro-choice President Obama at its spring commencement. The Archbishop of New Orleans says a priest can serve on a civil service commission without violating church law. A group which had accused the priest of anti-labor bias says his position as chair of the New Orleans Civil Service Commission was against a church law that prohibits priests from holding public office. Archbishop Gregory Aymond says a church lawyer reviewed the case and said the priest is allowed to serve on the commission. The group that raised the issue says it's taking the case to the Vatican. Turning to Rome, where Pope Benedict offers some words of encouragement to a delegation gathering there to work to abolish the death penalty. The community of Sant Egidio organized the meeting with the theme, No Justice Without Life.
I express my hope that your deliberations will encourage the political and legislative initiatives being promoted in a growing number of countries to eliminate the death penalty and to continue the substantive progress made in conforming penal law both to the human dignity of prisoners and the effective maintenance of public order.
That message came at the end of Pope Benedict's weekly general audience today. From Ireland, the Church issued reports on abuse in 6 dioceses. The reports, which cover the period from 1975 to the present day, showed that 85 priests were accused of abuse. A bishop in one diocese apologized for poor judgments in handling the cases. The reports also detailed measures that had been put in place to protect children. Back in this country, a New Jersey janitor says he murdered a priest for forcing him into having a sexual relationship. The janitor, Jose Feliciano, testified this week in his murder trial that he stabbed Father Edward Hines to death after the priest told Feliciano he was fired. Feliciano was trying to convince jurors the killing was not premeditated. Prosecutors say the story is bogus and that Father Hines fired Feliciano after learning the janitor had been wanted in Pennsylvania for indecent assault on a minor. Meanwhile, a Pittsburgh area family says workers at a cemetery jumped on the casket of a dead relative to jam it into a grave. The family claims that on the day of the funeral service 2 years ago, they went to visit the graves of other relatives when they saw workers jumping on and walking across the casket. The deceased woman's son, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter are suing the Diocese of Pittsburgh and its Cemeteries Association. and one Pennsylvania man is hitting the streets to help complete strangers. Dwayne Parker has the story.
Like any good Santa, no one really knows where he came from, but he knew Reading, the most impoverished city in America, needed his help.
Will this $600 help you?
Oh my God, are you serious? Destiny! Oh my God, thank you so much.
On a dark, rainy night, this secret Santa, who does not want to reveal his identity, did what Santa does best: give.
He's going around passing out money.
That's right, $100 bills to whoever he came in contact with, like Rita Heckman.
Can't be true.
Rita was just talking to her son, trying to figure out ways to pay the bills.
We say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I never dreamed someone would do something like that for me.
He even got on a BARTA bus and gave out more $100 bills.
I mean, what's going through your mind right now?
I don't even know.
Just total shock, right?
Yeah.
But he wasn't just giving out money. He even prayed with people.
This is honestly a blessing.
Accompanied by the Reading police, Secret Santa planned to give out $20,000 of his own money. The only requirement, that recipients have to commit an act of random kindness.
It can be anything. It can be a kind word, a good deed, a small helping hand.
But for many, this has already been a Christmas they will never forget.
And I thank God for it, that he did this for me today. I really mean that.
That report from Dwayne Parker. And farms across the country are pitching in to help U.S. troops celebrate Christmas. 800 farms across the U.S. are donating to the Trees for Troops campaign. The trees will be sent to soldiers in Spain and Bahrain. The effort is expected to deliver more than 17,000 trees this year. And an assemblyman in Wisconsin has introduced a resolution to call his state's tree a Christmas tree. The measure comes after Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker began using the term Christmas tree, the first time the tree has been called that in 26 years. A representative from the Freedom from Religion Foundation says using the word Christmas gives the tree a Christian connotation, and she does not think that's necessary in the state government. But the assemblyman who introduced the measure says to call it anything but a Christmas tree is insulting to the intelligence of Wisconsin citizens. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, how much do you know about Advent? We'll find out. Welcome back. 'Tis the season for shopping and Christmas parties. Christmas is less than a month away, and while getting together with family and friends and giving and getting presents is part of the season, it's not the reason for the season. Ahead of Christmas, when we celebrate the birth of Christ, we take 4 weeks to prepare for that in the season known as Advent. But do we know everything we need to know about Advent? When Father Jack Collins at BustedHalo.com hit the streets of New York, he found that many of the young people he talked to needed a refresher course. Earlier today, our news director, Ed Wilkinson, spoke with Father Jack and the host of the Busted Halo radio show on Sirius XM satellite radio, Father Dave Dwyer.
Well, Father Jack Collins and Father Dave Dwyer from Busted Halo, thanks for being with us today.
It's an honor. Thank you very much for having us. Great, thank you.
Good. Father Jack, I was watching You Don't Know Jack, your video about...
You're a wise man to be watching it.
Well, I wanted to catch up on Advent, and I saw you ask a group of young people what was the name of this period of waiting before Christmas, and nobody could come up with the word. One person finally came up with the correct name. I mean, is Advent still a relevant season for us?
Oh, I think so. We talked to people in Bryant Park just as we ran into them. So it wasn't specifically, say, Catholic audience. It was just anybody and everybody. Mm-hmm. So I think that may have been part of the reason why nobody really knew what Advent was all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were asking them, how do you prepare for Christmas? And they had, of course, they were going to decorate and they were preparing meals. And what should be the answer? And how should we really prepare for Christmas with Advent?
Good. It's a good question. I find in myself sort of two competing narratives or two competing stories that are looking for my attention. And especially this time of the year, one of them says, shop, 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 buy, buy, buy,
Right.
party, party, party. I like that narrative. That's a story I can plug into. But there's another narrative that I think brings me to a deeper place, not only in my life, but in life, period. And the other narrative is the narrative, if you want, of Advent, which is ponder, pause, reflect, take in what's going on around you. And I think that that story does bring us to a place in life where we become aware that we have far more than we sometimes are aware of, and that can lead us to being just grateful. And I think gratefulness is a way of saying, hey, my life is more than I am able to piece together. And that might bring a person to saying, I need to thank somebody for all of this, because it certainly isn't all mine.
How do we get beyond all of the distractions of the season, though? There are lights, there are advertising, commercials, shopping. How do we get beyond that and get people's attention?
No, that's very good. I think in some ways, though, all that stuff can be used as ways of saying, hey, this is the season to reflect a little bit more on the presence of God in our lives, because that's what all the celebrating, I think, is in the end all about. So, in other words, not to stand against it or not to, kind of move away from it, but to kind of stand with it and say, okay, in the midst of all this, what does it mean and why are we doing all this?
Right.
And maybe through that, people can come to see that there is more going on here than just the partying and just the celebrating.
Yeah, Father Dave, Busted Halo offers some tools to help us prepare for Christmas. Tell us about, in particular, the Advent calendar. I love that.
Well, even in answer to your previous question, we don't presume that anybody is going to be able to take a 3 or 4 or 7 day retreat in a quiet retreat house in the snow at any time during the season. So we like to provide what can be a mini retreat, even as Father Jack said, in the midst of all the busyness that's going around us. We like to provide something that might take literally 30 seconds to a minute, but might allow somebody at their desk or on their smartphone on the way to work just that little period of connecting with the church, connecting with the faith community about some of these things that we're talking about. So the Advent calendar for each day at bustedhalo.com, every day you go there, you'll see it. You'll see yourself greeted with a calendar with all the little traditional windows like an Advent calendar has. But instead, it'll be a quote from somebody that maybe is unexpected. Occasionally we have a saint or a pope, but also celebrity figures and sports figures and politicians and whatnot. And just one little nugget that might help somebody reflect on some dimension of hope or joy or peace, the themes of the Advent season. And then an actual task that you could do. We call them little daily jolts of activities. So moving towards living my faith. So to try to give something up today or don't procrastinate today, something like that, that people can actually do in the midst of their busy lives.
You know, one of the great characters of Advent is John the Baptist. What does John the Baptist mean to us today?
Well, I mean, John the Baptist clearly was somebody who was not Jesus himself, and was somebody that people got to know, and even people got to kind of like the way he was talking. But what he said was, you know, this isn't about me. This whole preparation time is for someone else that is coming. And John the Baptist called all of us to be those people that point others toward Christ. So if we can, if young people can, with their Facebook page, like with the thumbs up or forward or share either our Advent calendar or something else that they find on the internet or that they're reading, then they are actually being little John the Baptist in the 21st century, pointing the way to Jesus during the season.
What about Christmas trees that are going up and the lights that are up so early? Is it too early to put up a Christmas tree right now?
I work in 2 churches that already have Christmas trees up, so I'm going to have to plead the fifth on that one.
How about Father Jack? You have an answer for that one?
Well, I think for me it is a little early. All the Christmas music that seems to start, you know, I don't know, the end of October, it's just a bit much. I just, personal preference, you know, don't like to hear Christmas caroling maybe until, you know, a lot closer to Christmas. as we know, the church's Christmas celebration of the 12 days after Christmas.
Right.
You know, not the 12
weeks.
The 12 weeks leading up to Christmas. That's right.
Well,
and that kind of gets really kind of gets lost a little.
Sure.
I think that's the time for me for Christmas music.
Sure.
You'd want a tree up before then.
In your video, you wished everybody a happy Advent. Is this really a happy season, or it's not a time for penance, is it?
No, I think that's a good note you just struck. That's right. It's not penance so much as it is preparation time. And we're anticipating the birth of Jesus again, who is already with us and yet is to come. And that's a very happy celebration. It is a kind of a time for joyful preparation.